Friday the 13th. This is a true story, and it happened to me when I was 18 or 19 years old. It occurred during the last week before Easter, also known as the Holy Week, when it is believed that all evil forces are at their strongest. That year, my shift at the gas station fell on a Friday, the 13th. At that time, there was a fuel shortage, and I spent most of my shift sitting and waiting for customers. As the evening approached, I decided to read a book to pass the time. I can't recall how long I read, but I was interrupted by the sound of something metallic banging in the wind. I hesitated to step outside, as it was already quite late, and the area was only dimly lit by lamps. However, I peered out of the window and noticed a strange girl wandering around the station's grounds. She was wearing a long white shirt that reached her ankles, was barefoot, and had long blonde hair that seemed to stand on end, as if blown by the strong wind. She walked towards the booth, gesturing as if she wanted to ask for something. Thinking that she might be in trouble, I decided to help her. Despite her odd appearance, as she approached, the wind blew her around, and she fell right near the entrance to the booth. According to protocol, I shouldn't have opened the door for strangers, but I opened it just enough for her to slip inside, as I was too frightened to slam it shut. As I looked up, I saw a giant, wolf-like creature, its fur nearly white, sitting near the door. I panicked and hid under the counter, telling myself that I was safe behind the metal door and barred windows. 15 minutes later, a Gazelle car pulled up to the station, and 2 men stepped out. Relieved, I asked them to check behind the booth, as I was no longer alone. They had been driving along the highway when they hit something, but they couldn't agree on what it was. One insisted it was a large white dog, while the other claimed it was a girl in a long white shirt who had been running on all fours. They decided to retrace their path and help the person or animal they had hit. When my relief, Tatiana Petrovna, arrived at 8 a.m. the next morning, I barely managed to open the door, and the sun was already up, revealing no sign of the previous night's terror. I told Tatiana Petrovna about my frightening encounter, and she asked, "Maybe you just dozed off and dreamed the whole thing? But what about the error check?" "I processed it and even attached it to the cash journal," I replied. Tatiana Petrovna later mentioned my story to an old lady who told her that the girl was likely a witch and that she probably had been hit by the car. Witches, according to her, could change their appearance, which was why the men were confused about who or what they had hit. She explained that witches found it difficult to die without passing on their powers, and that the girl had come to the gas station, hoping I could take on her powers. Thankfully, the wind blew her away before she could speak to me. Night mysteries. In the late 1990s, I too experienced a strange event. I was living with my parents in a 5-story building, and it was a Friday. After work, I bought a beer for the evening and was relaxing when my parents left for a weekend in the countryside. I decided to stay behind, avoiding the gardening work. As the night grew colder, I went to the stairwell to smoke a cigarette. Each floor had lights on, so it was well lit. I sat on a rug by the door and began smoking. Suddenly, a little girl, around 5 years old, appeared from the 4th floor, making her way up to me. What struck me was that she seemed to have appeared out of thin air, as I hadn't heard any footsteps or door openings. She stopped near the garbage chute between the 4th and 5th floors when she noticed me. The girl wore a light green dress with flowers and ladybugs on it, white socks and red slippers. 2 white bows adorned her hair. She didn't seem to be going to any of the apartments, as the fifth floor was the last one, and my neighbors and my apartments were empty. The only remaining possibility was the rooftop hatch. The girl stared at me, making me feel uneasy, and I even choked on my cigarette. I wanted to ask her who she was visiting, but I couldn't bring myself to open my mouth. Suddenly, the girl turned around and went back down to the fourth floor, standing there in silence. I finished smoking, stubbed out the cigarette, and headed back to my apartment. I had a couple more beers, but I only smoked on the balcony, unable to shake the image of the girl from my mind. I tried to reason that she might have been lost and looking for her home. However, something didn't feel right. She didn't cry or seem scared, and she had appeared so suddenly. When she ascended, I heard her shoes creak, but I hadn't heard any sounds before. The apartment door had not closed since then, meaning no one had entered or left. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still in the stairwell. Eventually, I went to bed, where my bed was next to the wall adjoining my neighbor's apartment, occupied by a young guy named Lioha, who was about to join the army. I undressed and went to bed, but then I heard the sound of a creaking bed, as if someone had lain down on it. I recognized that sound, as I had heard it often. However, he had left with his parents for the countryside. I knew this because I had seen his whole family, greeting them in the yard where they were getting into their car. His apartment was empty, and I would have heard some sounds if someone else had been there. But this time, who was on Lioha's bed? The mysterious girl immediately came to mind. I listened for any sounds, but there was only silence. I woke up the next morning around 9 o'clock with birds chirping outside. But I couldn't forget the strange events of the previous night, which I still can't explain. The case of the convicts. In the annals of medieval England, a chilling tale has been passed down through the ages, that of 3 escaped convicts seeking refuge in the dense forests. These fugitives traversed the thick woods, cautiously moving further away from civilization. As the surviving convict recounted, they continued their journey one fateful night, shrouded in a dense fog that obscured their vision, even under the light of the full moon. The escapees were unarmed, their only fear greater than their captors, the forest's predators. The forest's predators. As the surviving convict paused to relieve himself, his 2 companions ventured deeper into the fog. When he returned, the convict heard an otherworldly roar, followed by the screams of his doomed comrades. Frozen in fear, he did not dare pursue the source of the horrifying noise. When pressed, he could not determine if the men had been attacked by beasts or by an unseen force. The one who had fallen behind jumped to his feet, but he was so frightened that he did not risk running to help his friends. According to him, the roar of the unknown beast was so loud that it was not even clear who had attacked the unfortunate people. So he rushed from there to escape. A little while later, he came across a tree, convenient for climbing, and the man climbed it. Until dawn, he trembled with fear on it. In the morning, the criminal decided to look for the place where the attack had taken place. By this time, the fog had cleared, and visibility improved. Soon, the convict came across the heads of his brothers in misfortune lying on the ground, and their bloody prison clothes torn to shreds. Overcome with terror, he fled the scene, eventually collapsing from exhaustion, having gone without food or rest. The king's soldiers discovered him, accompanied by their hounds, searching for the escaped prisoners. Upon hearing his harrowing tale, they documented the incident, though the beast responsible for the ghastly murders remains shrouded in mystery. This chilling tale, whispered in hushed tones, has persisted through the centuries, serving as a grim reminder of the unknown horrors that the dark forests may hold.